Ash Ketchum, the Alola champion, versus Cynthia, the Sinnoh champion. A match that had 10 plus years of build-up in history behind it that finally occurred in the semi-finals of the Masters 8 tournament. After a long, hard-fought battle, Ash eventually ended up defeating Cynthia and moving on to the Masters 8 finals. But despite Ash's best efforts, was he really the true victor of this battle? Did he have any opportunities to win much earlier in the battle? Or did he play the best battle that he could have? Or perhaps Cynthia could have claimed victory much earlier instead? Today we'll break down Ash vs Cynthia to see who should have truly came out on top. Both had very powerful teams with their own Mega Evolutions to take advantage of. Or not. So we'll analyze their battle strategies, the Pokemon they used, and the moves they had access to in order to see who really should have come out on top. But to see if Ash really should have won this battle, we won't know unless we jump into the battle. The battle begins and Ash's first Pokemon is Dragonite, while Cynthia sends out the forbidden Pokemon, Spiritomb. Ash begins with a big move, calling for Dragonite to use Draco Meteor, but Cynthia counterattacks with Sucker Punch, interrupting the move's charging time. Dragonite regains its footing and then successfully fires off Draco Meteor. This lands a direct hit on Spiritomb, although it seemingly does no damage. And here is where I'm giving the first misplay of the match to Ash. Spiritomb is a Dark Ghost-type Pokemon, and prior to Generation 6, it and Sableye were the only Pokemon in the games with no weaknesses since the Fairy-type hadn't yet been created. But Ash has a Fairy-type move on his team, Dazzling Gleam on his Gengar. Despite Gengar being weak to Dark and Ghost moves from Spiritomb, it would have been better for Ash to deal super effective damage to Cynthia's Pokemon instead. He should have switched out Dragonite immediately. Even though Dragonite gets a stab bonus with its Dragon-type moves, Gengar's intangibility powers can help it dodge attacks from Spiritomb, so Ash gets the first misplay. Should have switched out to Gengar. Ash has Dragonite use Dragon Claw next, and Cynthia cleverly counters with Hypnosis and puts the Dragon Pokemon to sleep. Cynthia then has her Spiritomb repeatedly use Dream Eater to sap Dragonite of its power and strength. And here is where Ash is going to get another misplay, as this would have been the perfect time to recall Dragonite and switch into Gengar. Ash could have fully switched into Gengar when Dragonite went to sleep, and the fact he didn't cost him an early loss, as he could have tried to wake up Dragonite later. But he just stands there and watches this happen, hoping it'll wake up. If he can recall his Corphish to snap it out of confusion in the battle frontier, he can recall his sleeping Dragonite, so misplay Ash. Ash's next Pokemon is finally Gengar, and Cynthia recalls Spiritomb to keep control of the battle and keep Ash on his toes, so well done Cynthia. She switches into her Roserade, a poison type just like Gengar. At this time, I'd also just like to note that now it's even weirder that Ash didn't switch into Gengar earlier since it's his second Pokemon anyways, but I digress. However, there is another problem here and another misplay for Ash. He's going to continue battling with Gengar when he instead should have switched out for Dracovish, which has access to Ice Fang, which is super effective on the Grass-type Roserade. Yes, Gengar will resist any grass and poison moves from Roserade, but he's also not going to be able to deal any super effective damage on Roserade either. So Ash should have switched out his Pokemon here. Could have done more damage. Gengar fires off Shadow Ball while taking hits from Bullet Seed, but it does little damage. Roserade blocks Shadow Ball, and then we get a collision between Gengar's Will-O-Wisp and Roserade's Leaf Storm. The two moves collide and both Pokemon are struck, which results in Roserade getting burned. So Cynthia makes the wise move of recalling Roserade and sending Spiritomb back out. With Spiritomb back on the field, Ash uses Dazzling Gleam, which means he must know it's weak to Fairy types, which just, again, makes me wonder why he didn't lead with Gengar. Spiritomb counters with Sucker Punch and both Pokemon take heavy damage. The damage done to Spiritomb is considerably great, but unlike Spiritomb, the damage done to Gengar is enough to knock it out. Cynthia switches out Spiritomb for Togekiss to once again keep Ash on his toes, while Ash attempts to turn the tide of battle with Pikachu. Togekiss takes to the sky! Togekiss takes to the sky, and Pikachu lets loose Thunderbolt. Togekiss dodges every Thunderbolt and lands a direct hit with Air Slash. It then goes for Zen Headbutt and causes Pikachu to flinch due to its Serene Grace ability. The attack is successful and Pikachu takes some good damage. Now, had Ash switched into Dracovish earlier, he probably could have been using Gengar against Togekiss instead of Pikachu, which might have had an easier time landing a hit on Togekiss with Sludge Bomb instead of Pikachu trying to land a hit with Thunderbolt. To counter Pikachu, Cynthia then sends out Gastrodon, which is immune to any electric attacks from Pikachu. Massive props to Cynthia for truly controlling this entire battle so far. With Gastrodon on the field, she has it use Earth Power. Pikachu avoids any damage by jumping and staying on a piece of rock that's broken off from the ground. Cynthia is not surprised by this and commands everyone's favorite move, Stone Edge.
Stone Edge! だがあと一歩攻めきれなかったな。ストーンエッジ!
Ash smartly counters this attack by using Iron Tails to slice through the rock pillars, shocking Cynthia. Then he has Pikachu fling the massive boulders at Gastrodon, further surprising Cynthia. With Gastrodon unable to move by holding back the giant rocks, Ash has Pikachu use Quick Attack to slam into the rocks and deal damage to Gastrodon. This is enough to knock out Gastrodon. Now here's where I'm going to call a bit of shenanigans and try to explain it. This is essentially Pikachu one-shotting Gastrodon with Quick Attack. However, Pikachu did launch 2 massive boulders from its own Stone Edge attack at it. Therefore, it could be argued that Gastrodon took damage from its own move, which of course would be equal to its own strength, which is then increased by the fact that Pikachu launched it at Gastrodon. Then with the immense speed of Pikachu's Quick Attack, slamming into Gastrodon and having enough force to break the rocks, I think it could be justified that Gastrodon could have been knocked out here for sure. So well done Ash for using anime physics and real-world physics to your advantage. With Gastrodon out, Cynthia sends out Spiritomb for its 3rd appearance. To start, Ash has Pikachu use their trademark Thunderbolt Counter Shield technique that he hasn't used since Sinnoh. This completely blocks the Hypnosis attack coming from Spiritomb and causes big damage. Pikachu then uses Electro Web to defend against Spiritomb's Sucker Punch attack and then strikes with Iron Tail. But as it does so, Cynthia says, "Please Spiritomb," and it lets out a purple ghostly flame. Pikachu's attack is successful, but something seems off. Then a black and purple energy emits from Spiritomb's keystone and surrounds Pikachu, draining it of its energy and strength. This is the frightening move Destiny Bond. Now Spiritomb and Pikachu are both unable to battle. So far there have yet to be any more misplays. However, Ash has now lost half his team already, and Cynthia still has heavy hitters like her Garchomp and Milotic waiting in the wing. How will Ash handle this setback? Let's continue. The match continues and both trainers send out Dragon-type Pokemon, with Ash sending out his Dracovish and Cynthia sending out her Garchomp. Ash goes for a head-on assault with Ice Fang, but it is rendered useless as Garchomp dodges the incoming attack and lands a direct hit with Dragon Claw. She then has Garchomp use Stealth Rock to scatter pointed stones all over the field, then she recalls Garchomp. And here Cynthia is immediately receiving a misplay, as if she intended to use Stealth Rock with her Garchomp all along, then Garchomp should have been the very first Pokemon she sent out. Rourke from Orberg City famously used Stealth Rock against Paul and Ash in their gym battles. I'll let Brock explain what it does.
Stealth Rock causes damage to Pokemon that appear later in the battle. It has no effect at all on Pokemon currently out there.
You mean if Paul decides to call Elekid back and choose another Pokemon, then that Pokemon will take all the damage?
Right. It looks like Rourke is taking care of Paul's substitutions before they happen, making things that much trickier for Paul.
So if that's the case, had Cynthia used Stealth Rock from the very beginning, each of Ash's Pokemon would have taken more damage each time they came out into the battle. So that's a misplay. Cynthia should have capitalized on the damage she could have dealt. However, with Garchomp being weak to any Dragon-type moves from Dracovish, it was smart to recall it at the very least to keep it from taking super effective damage. But then Cynthia sends out Roserade for some reason, which will earn her another misplay. Roserade is a grass poison type, which makes it weak to Dracovish's Ice Fang. If anything, she should have sent out Togekiss, which would at least be immune to Dracovish's Dragon Rush, or she could have even sent out Milotic and strike it with Disarming Voice, so misplay Cynthia. Go, Hop, and Ash all notice that Roserade isn't burned anymore. This reveals that it has the ability Natural Cure, which heals status conditions upon switching out. Dracovish goes for Fishious Rend, but as it closes in, Roserade decisively strikes with Poison Jab and poisons Dracovish. However, Dracovish doesn't give in and still deals damage with Fishious Rend, knocking both Pokemon back. Roserade then uses Leaf Storm and Dracovish charges through with Dragon Rush. Despite taking neutral damage from Leaf Storm, it scores an explosive hit on Roserade and knocks it out. Ash then decides to have Dracovish stay in the battle despite the poison. Cynthia's next Pokemon is Milotic. Attempting to wrap up the battle quickly for Dracovish's sake, Ash goes for Dragon Rush. However, Cynthia counters with Disarming Voice, which holds Dracovish's Dragon Rush attack back. It then wraps itself around Dracovish, holding it in place. It then goes for a disgusting Iron Head, and Dracovish counters with Fishious Rend as its final move. Milotic gets blown back, but Dracovish is left defeated. This brings Ash down to just 2 Pokemon. With that, he then sends out Surfetch, which instantly takes damage from Stealth Rock due to switching in. Again, Cynthia should have had Garchomp use Stealth Rock at the very start of the match to have each of Ash's Pokemon take damage as they switch in throughout the match. Who knows, maybe Cynthia would have won already. Ash then gets a brilliant idea and has Surfetch use Brutal Swing with its shield. In similar fashion to Captain America, his shield goes around the entire battlefield, destroying each stone one by one. As the shield flies around the battlefield, Milotic then goes for Hydro Pump, but Surfetch dodges it. It catches its shield and then goes for Fury Cutter. Milotic uses Iron Head, but Sirfetch'd blocks the attack and cuts through with Fury Cutter. As Milotic is blown back, it uses Disarming Voice. Sirfetch'd withstands the attack and charges up Meteor Assault. Once charged, it launches Meteor Assault as Milotic and deals a devastating blow. This attack knocks out Milotic. Sirfetch'd stays in the battle, and Cynthia calls upon Garchomp again. Garchomp begins with Scale Shot, and Sirfetch'd uses Fury Cutter to cut its way through Garchomp's attack. Garchomp counters with Dragon Claw, however, Sirfetch'd is able to dodge the attack by using Detect. When it lands to the ground, it goes for its signature attack, Meteor Assault. To counter this attack, Garchomp unleashes a ferocious Draco Meteor attack which rains down upon Sirfetch'd as it charges toward Garchomp. A good way to weaken the power of its attack and lessen the damage. When the smoke clears, Garchomp stumbles, but Sirfetch'd is the one who's taken immense damage from the most powerful Dragon-type move, and it is left unable to battle. Ash is left with just one Pokemon, his Lucario. Then Cynthia yet again recalls Garchomp and sends out Togekiss. Ash sends out Lucario, and Lucario is his final chance to win the match. Ash has Lucario start off with Bullet Punch, and Togekiss uses Air Slash. Using Bullet Punch, Lucario deflects the incoming attack and cuts through it. It then jumps into the air and aggressively pummels Togekiss into the ground with Bullet Punch, but it quickly bounces back and takes to the sky like the attack did nothing. Lucario charges up an Aura Sphere, but Togekiss interrupts it with Air Slash, sending Lucario flying. Togekiss goes for Air Slash again, and Lucario perfectly defends against the attack using Bullet Punch. Then, to everyone's surprise, Cynthia recalls Togekiss, but not to switch into Garchomp, but to Dynamax it. Dynamax Togekiss hits the field, giving Ash his next towering obstacle to take down in this battle. Let's see how he fares. The match continues, and Ash and Lucario stare down Cynthia's Dynamax Togekiss as it takes up most of the battlefield. In response to this, Ash finally unleashes Mega Lucario using their power of Mega Evolution. Lucario starts with Aura Sphere, and Togekiss uses Max Airstream. Lucario charges through the powerful winds and fires off Aura Sphere, but it's blown back. Unfortunately, Togekiss crushes Lucario's Aura Sphere and simply receives a speed boost from using Max Airstream. Togekiss goes for Max Airstream again, and Lucario jumps over the winds and unleashes a barrage of bullet punches to Togekiss's back. The force of the attack drops Togekiss to the ground, but it almost instantly gets back up. So then Ash has Lucario charge a giant Aura Sphere like when he trained with his Greninja. This time, Togekiss's Max Airstream is unsuccessful as the attack is held back by Aura Sphere, and then the Aura Sphere lands a direct hit, and Togekiss reverts to normal size. Togekiss rises again, and with its speed increased from Max Airstream, it begins to use quick maneuvers to dart around the battlefield. It unleashes Sky Attack, and Lucario dodges with Double Team, and then strikes with Aura Sphere. Togekiss rebounds and uses Sky Attack again, but Lucario counters with a supercharged Bullet Punch and knocks back Togekiss, leaving it unable to battle. Here I must give Cynthia another misplay. Dynamaxing Togekiss would have been all fine and dandy had Cynthia made full use of its effects and powers. All Cynthia did was spam Max Airstream, and while yes, a speed increase is nice, she didn't make the most of it. All we see is Togekiss flying faster on the battlefield, but she does nothing more to give herself an advantage over Lucario. What I believe Cynthia should have done was use the Psychic-type Max move, Max Mindstorm, in tandem with Max Airstream. See, Max Mindstorm, once used, sets up Psychic Terrain, which would have given a big power bonus to any subsequent use of Max Mindstorm, and she could have used Max Airstream once to give herself a speed increase. Then when it reverts to normal size, it can use the extra speed to quickly deliver attacks with Zen Headbutt, which would be boosted in strength due to the Psychic Terrain set up by Max Mindstorm. Even if Togekiss still fell to Lucario, it would probably mean that Garchomp would have had a much easier time defeating Lucario, allowing her to take the win. So misplay Cynthia. But this is also a double misplay, as Cynthia, as we all know, should have Mega Evolved her Garchomp instead. Taking into consideration everything I previously stated about using Dynamax Togekiss, let's also consider the power of Mega Garchomp. Garchomp in the past has already been established to be a fearsome foe, as it's been shown standing up to the likes of Flint's Infernape at the end of the DP saga, or even facing down legendaries in the Black and White series. Had Togekiss used Baton Pass to pass the speed increase onto Garchomp, that would have been another excellent use of Dynamax. However, that of course didn't occur. I believe Cynthia should have simply had Togekiss battle Lucario in its normal state and try to get flinches off with Zen Headbutt. She could whittle down Lucario and then use Mega Garchomp to finish off Lucario, as Lucario was still even struggling against base form Garchomp. With the power bonus from Mega Evolution, I don't believe Ash's Lucario would have been able to stay in the battle long enough to defeat Garchomp after battling Togekiss. So another misplay to Cynthia. Cynthia sends out her final Pokemon, her ace, Garchomp. She leads with Scale Shot, and Lucario charges in headfirst with Bullet Punch to defend against the onslaught. It then fires off Aura Sphere to cancel out the attack. The two Pokemon then engage in a brutal beatdown, clashing with Dragon Claw and Bullet Punch in head-to-head combat. They go back and forth, exchanging blows, and eventually make some distance between themselves. And here is where I'd like to give a misplay to both Ash and Cynthia. Cynthia's vital mistake here is not teaching her Garchomp a ground-type move prior to this match. Cynthia knew she'd be battling Ash, yet her Garchomp has a rock-type move and 3 dragon-type moves in its arsenal. It's known Dig in the past, and she could have easily taught it Dig again, or perhaps another move like Bulldoze or Scorching Sands. This would have gave her a super effective move to use against Lucario. If anything, maybe Cynthia could have switched around her battle strategy a little, so she didn't need to use Gastrodon earlier in the match. Had she been able to save Gastrodon for later in the match, maybe that would have made a difference by being able to land Earth Power against Lucario. Ash's mistake is not making full use of Lucario's moveset here, as he underutilized the move Double Team. With the face-off between Garchomp and Lucario being largely head-to-head, Ash could have used Double Team to outnumber Garchomp and dish out more damage. Both trainers potentially had the opportunity to clinch victory more sooner had they prepped for the battle differently or used certain moves more often. As both Pokemon stand on the brink of exhaustion, Cynthia sees an opening to attack and strikes with Dragon Claw, but Ash makes a big brain play and has Lucario use Reversal. It charges up its attack as Garchomp closes in with Dragon Claw. Garchomp strikes first and Lucario counters with Reversal. Both Pokemon take big damage and critical blows as both Pokemon fall to the ground in exhaustion. A few moments pass and Lucario stands tall, while Garchomp remains on the ground. Lucario has won, Garchomp is unable to battle, and Ash has defeated the Sinnoh champion. So, what is my final verdict on this battle? Should Ash really have won this battle, or should Cynthia have won much earlier? And to be quite honest, Cynthia definitely should have won this match. She was just far more calculated and controlled this battle for 90% of the time. Spiritomb alone took out 3 of Ash's Pokemon. Had Cynthia simply used a few different moves on her Pokemon and especially lead with Garchomp to immediately set up Stealth Rock and use its Mega Evolution later on, I think Cynthia absolutely would have won. But what do you think? Do you agree or disagree? Leave your thoughts down below, and for more Pokemon battle breakdowns, click the videos on screen. Special thanks to our channel members for their extra support, and until next time, train hard, and I'll catch you guys later.